Hello there, everybody, and welcome to SnowFlake 33. My name is Mike Bostwick, and I'm the owner of Pipe Choir Records. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a new CD that I've released. It's PC3's Ad Astra 3, and originally I wanted to start in numerical order and go from Ad Astra 1 to 2 to 3, but I decided, because the album is new and it needs all the push that it can get, that I would start with Ad Astra 3. So I hope you don't mind if I just talk about it a little bit. Now, the album Ad Astra 3, if I were to talk about it, which I'm about to, I would have to premise the whole description of the album by telling you a story first that kind of informed the album, at least conceptually, to me. Okay, so back in 2011, my wife and I survived a tornado. And it was a major tornado. It was an F3. And we had been through tornadoes before, 2 other times. This was the 3rd one. And it was unlike anything else that we had experienced before. Now, something that I would like to explain about myself really quick before I continue with the story is that I've always been a proponent of extreme weather. I love extreme weather. It's very exhilarating to me, and it inspires me, and it just electrifies me. It wakes me up. It's fun to me. But with this storm, the damage was so severe and so complete that it was shocking. It was just going to familiar places and all the places, the areas that we knew and we recognized, and just seeing how much damage there was. I mean, the place was gone. It was erased. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it was really incredible. And after the storm, while we were driving around, kind of surveying the damage of this area that we lived in, and there was debris everywhere. There was pieces of houses everywhere, and there were these huge trees. I mean, not tipped over, but like literally snapped in half. I mean, they weren't pushed over. They weren't leaning. They were literally broken. And it was incredible to see. But it was also kind of sad at the same time. Also, something that I should say really quick that's worth noting is that after this storm, the power was down for like a week, or maybe even more than that. I mean, it was a serious crisis. I mean, think about it. No power for a week. I mean, that means no showers, no cooking, no air conditioning. I mean, we were Amish for at least a solid week. Think about it. Anyway, now after the storm, we were driving around the area, kind of trying to survey exactly the scope and the level of damage that had taken place. And as we were driving down the road, I noticed that there was this sagging power line hanging across the street, and resting right on top of that wire, that sagging wire, was a rather large piece of a tree branch that had flown through the air and landed right on this wire, and it was resting there. It was kind of just teetering. And as soon as I saw that, I said to my wife, like, wow, I mean, look at that. Just look at that image right there. It perfectly summed up this entire event. And I knew as soon as I saw that it was going to be something that I would use in the future, probably for an album cover or something. But I knew that it was going to be something that I used somewhere down the line. Now, when you look at the CD, Ad Astra 3, when you look at the cover art, you'll see a triangle. That's the first thing you see. And to cover that really quick, on the first two Ad Astra CDs that are all part of this series, it's 3 CDs in the series. The first one has a square on the front. The second one has a circle. And so, sticking with the basic shapes theme, I decided that for Ad Astra 3 it would be cool to use probably like a triangle, because it has 3 points and it's the third album, and probably the final installment in the Ad Astra series. I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure it's the last one. And then inside that triangle, I put that image of that sagging wire with the tree branch. So, and with the stormy clouds behind it and everything. And I thought that it was a perfect image and a perfect design for what you were about to listen to, because this tornado back in 2011 is really what informed practically all of the material that you are going to hear on the album. So, having said that, we have covered the cover. So now you have the booklet and you open it up, and what I decided to put in there was a photograph that I had taken. Now, after the storm, I had the foresight to go outside with a camera maybe 3 days after the storm, a couple days, probably 3 days after the storm. 3. And I snapped a lot of pictures, and I documented as much as I could. And when I was assembling Ad Astra 3, I had chosen 2 of those pictures to be candidates for the inside booklet. And I picked the one that I put in there just because I thought it was a little bit better. But it could have just as easily been the other picture. And in this picture that takes up the entirety of the inside of the CD booklet, you see a area that I jumped out of the car, snapped a picture, and it's only a small little area that's actually in the frame of the picture. But this picture is an accurate representation of what the entire area looked like after this storm came through. So when you open up the booklet and you see the picture, it will probably be very clear to everyone who sees it exactly what I'm talking about here when I say that this storm was really bad. Really quick, I guess I can mention that I had made Ad Astra 1 and Ad Astra 2, and they have kind of a similar, all 3 CDs have kind of a similar format. The cover art is similar, the interior of each one is similar, everything is kind of like the same. And I thought that was cool, like up until Ad Astra 2, and by then it was kind of too late to change my mind about cover art and things like that. So I decided what I would do, instead of putting the track list on the backside of the booklet like I had with the previous 2 CDs, that instead this time, just to try to make it a little bit different, I would put a poem there that I wrote instead. And what's cool about the poem is that I wrote it, if I can remember correctly, I wrote it like maybe 3 or 4 days before the storm came. And there was kind of like severe weather for a week or so prior to the storm, and then this storm came, and it was just the you know the granddaddy of them all. I mean, it was really intense. So I wrote this poem. I won't read it to you because that would, in my opinion, that's kind of lame. But that's why there's a poem there instead of the track list on the back of the booklet. I was trying to be creative and break out a little bit from that format that I had established for myself with the first two CDs. I guess that's one of the good things about doing this kind of stuff is you make your own rules. So I can break them too. Now with the CD, the actual CD disc face, you'll see a repeat of that branch hanging on the wire theme, and I did that just because I was so happy to be able to use that image. I thought that was just really cool. Now let's see. Okay, so I'll talk about the music now. There's some cool stuff there, I suppose. A warn signal. Okay. Let's see. The title, A Warn Signal. Not to be confused with the other piece of music I released called A Warm Signal. A Warn Signal was a name that I had a very hard time coming up with. And it took me about 3 months, literally 3 months, to come up with a name for this very short piece of music. I mean, I knew it was going to be the lead-off piece for the album. It was going to kind of set the tone for the listener, and the title is very important, at least to me. So for months I would write out lists of songs, just brainstorming any idea that came to mind, and I thought I had some pretty clever ones, and I would kind of show them to my wife, and she would be like, no, that's lame, no. And so ultimately, in the end, after months of frustration, one day my wife says to me, what about a warn signal? Like a warning signal, And I grabbed her and I kissed her, and I was like, thank you for coming up with a name for this song and ending this this stupid conundrum that I'm in, because it's highly, highly unusual for me to not be able to come up with a name for something. I mean, to me, one of the funnest things about making music or art or anything like that is getting to name this stuff. And the fact that I couldn't come up with something, when I think about it now, it's like I don't even know what was going on, because wow, I mean, it just took so long. It was like the longest naming process in my entire music career. I mean, normally I have a name before something's even finished. I know what I'm going to call it, and this one was just not. It was not that way. So my wife technically named that song. The music for A Warn Signal, there's a little bit of a story there, I guess. What I remember is that I had made a piece of music a long time ago for a pipe choir album that I was working on at the time, and one that I'm currently working on right now, trying to finish it and complete it. And the opening track for that CD was this piece of music that I had made called After Lifetime. That was what I was going to call it. And I released that song and a couple of other songs online just to kind of send them up as a test balloon. And no one really cared. So I took those songs down and I put them away. And then when it came time to start assembling the track list for Ad Astra 3, I remembered, I knew I wanted to have a piece of music, like I said, that would kind of guide the listener into this theme and kind of set the tone for what you were going to hear. And I was going to write a new piece of music, and then I remembered that I had this piece from back in, I don't even remember now, maybe 2012. And I remembered that it had a very lofty, windy kind of feel to it. and would tie into this whole Ad Astra 3 wind tornado theme. And so what I did was I called the session back up into my system and edited the vocals out. And what I wanted to switch it up with was a broadcast message from the emergency broadcasting system, a storm warning. There's a storm coming, severe thunder is reported, that kind of thing. And I figured that for that tornado that came through our area, there probably was somewhere the actual recording of that message. And my wife and I both looked everywhere that we could think of. We scoured the internet trying to find this sample of this message, and we just could not find it anywhere. But what we could find was the transcript from the actual broadcast the day that storm came through our area. So what I had to do was read the warning myself and try to simulate as closely as I could what a storm warning would sound like. So I had a recording of a warning signal, a broadcast warning, and I tried to match my voice up as closely as I could. I had to deteriorate the sound and kind of play around with it for a little while, but I think I managed to pull that off pretty good. So when you hear that warning signal, that's my voice. It's not the actual warning from the emergency broadcasting system. But I put it on top of that music, and I thought, wow, that works. It's what I had in mind. It definitely takes the person who's pressing play and the CD starts it. It definitely sets the mood. It sets the tone. It kind of informs you of like what's coming, that this storm is coming. And as the album progresses, it would crescendo to this storm, kind of the height of the storm, which I thought was kind of a cool kind of theme and kind of thing to play with, Okay. Something that I wanted to share with you really quick, and I'm not even really sure how important it is that I share this with you, but I'm just going to go right ahead and say it anyway. Like in the spirit of fun and explanation. I'm just going to go right ahead and say it anyway. When I listen to any of my music, and especially for the sake of this conversation, I'll use Ad Astra 3 as an example. You already know there was the story of the storm that happened back in 2011, and I've explained to you how it's been rolled into this narrative. Now it's an artistic theme. Okay, so yes, there was a storm. Yes, it really happened, and you can put your finger on it. This is what this is about. The second level that my music functions on, to me, is the technical level. Okay? And by saying the technical level, what I mean is, what words am I saying? What are the lyrics? How many times do I do something in a song? Where does something start and where does something stop? The performance on the instruments and all of those kinds of things make up like the technical aspect of what I've done. And so you have those two. You have the temporal, which would be the literal meaning, like the easy to grasp concept. Like, here is what this is. It's a storm. The second is the technical. This is how the music was executed. This is what I'm actually saying. And then there's the metaphorical, which is a little bit more abstract and a slight bit more subjective. But with this storm, it does serve as a metaphor for an entirely separate set of events that were more emotional in nature, um, my personal experience, separate from the storm and separate from the technical. So when I listen to something like Ad Astra 3, or any of my music for that matter, I consider it a success to myself when it's functioning very well on all three of those levels simultaneously. And I hope that I don't sound like too much of a wiener, saying that, but I just kind of figured that I would share that with you. I'm not sure whether I needed to, but it's a three-pronged delivery. Just saying. So, let's see. That was a warn signal. I'm trying to think if I remember anything else about that song. I just don't. Okay, so maybe if I think of things in the future or something, if people do actually enjoy this little thing I'm doing here, maybe I'll amend these somehow and give you more information. But we'll just see how that goes. Anyway, so a warn signal fades out, and then the song, it's actually kind of like the main title, and then I have 4 subtitles underneath it. So it fades into track number 2, which is When the Wind Comes. And really quick, I can talk to you a little bit about When the Wind Comes. Let me see. I'll say the title comes from another song that I'd written a while ago. It was called The Sun in the Sky. It was like a sketch kind of idea that I did. I'll probably play a little bit of that for you right here. And it was a pretty good song. It was pretty decent, but it was just one of those songs that I just didn't go back to and didn't finish. I moved on to something else. And I have a lot of songs like that are kind of, they're not vaulted, but they're kind of like, they have merit, but I moved on to something else that had more merit. So I have this small collection of music that hasn't been heard yet, and I don't have any problem drawing from those things and pulling them into something that's maybe better or that I'm working on currently. And in this case, that's what happened. So I had started, I had sat down to write what would become When the Wind Comes. And I knew a few things when I started. Well, one, I knew I wanted to do a new PC3 song. And at this point, I had done a lot of longer pieces. I think the standard length I was kind of shooting for was like 20 minutes, 22 minutes, because that's what people really wanted to hear from me. So, okay, that's what I'll do, And then I figured, well, if people like a 20-minute song, they may like a song that's 45 minutes long. Like if I started to go past the 20-minute mark. So when I sat down to do When the Wind Comes. I knew that's what I wanted to do. It was going to be 45 minutes long. Come hell or high water. It was kind of like pushing myself. That's a lot of space to fill with new music and new ideas. It's a lot of tracks, a lot of work. But I wanted to do that. And I think the working title I had at first for the song was Eruption Lights. That's what I decided to call it. I knew I wanted it to have some kind of like bombast almost, or some kind of, I wanted it to be that kind of thing. So the working title was Eruption Lights. And I grabbed the, I didn't grab anything. What happened was I started the process of recording. You just start going. And I got a really strong bed of music going. Probably took me about a week or so to kind of get the bass down, the framework down. And then normally what I'll do around that time is start scatting vocals over the music. And you sing with your soul first. You're not saying words. You're making noises with your mouth. You're singing with your soul first, and then you sing with your brain later. That's not my quote. That was a quote from a very, very intelligent person, and a little bit of advice that I picked up over the years, and I've always remembered it, and it carried over into my own work. So that's what I did, and while I was scatting those vocals, while those sounds were coming out, this song from back in the day, called "The Sun in the Sky," started to come out of my mouth. So I'm like, okay, it fits over this music. Okay, it was a decent song then. I'll just pull it into this and make it even better. So in that song, that's where the phrase "When the Wind Comes," I say it in those lyrics, and I decided to not call this piece Eruption Lights or The Sun in the Sky. I decided to call it When the Wind Comes because it would tie into this whole the story of this tornado that I'm trying to tell. And that's what I did. Let's see, is there anything else I want to say about When the Wind Comes? Oh, you know what? I'll say this about that song. And like I said, it's a little bit of trivial information. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of cool in the sense that, I'll just explain it. Okay, there's a movie called The Sixth Sense, and I'm sure that everyone who's hearing this knows the movie and knows what I'm talking about. If not, then wow, that's amazing. But it was a very good movie and all that, and I enjoyed the movie. And there's one particular scene in that movie that really kind of always stood out to me, and it was the scene where the mother and the son, the star of the movie, are at the grocery store or something, and he's in the shopping cart, and she starts to push him, and his arms go up and his head goes back, and he closes his eyes, and he's like, for the only time really in the movie, this horrible, scary story about this little boy who's suffering so much, there's this little moment of joy, and yeah, the rest of the movie was great and everything, but the part that really stuck out in my mind and in my memory was that image. It was probably maybe 10 seconds long, but the cool part about that is that was enough to kind of inspire a 45-minute song. Like, it was enough to kind of, like, that was what I was trying to capture, not just the story of the tornado, but just like that idea that, he could be free for just a moment. He could be free, and his eyes were closed, and he raised his arms, and that's what I'm singing about in that song. In hindsight, it's really kind of what I've put together in my mind, having seen the movie not too long ago, and I remembered, oh yeah, that's right, that was in there. I should probably mention that somewhere down the line. So that's When the Wind Comes. Now, let's see. When the Wind Comes originally, like I said, was 45 minutes. And when I recorded it originally and I released it, I wanted to go for the 45-minute thing, and that was cool and great and everything. I accomplished that, finished. But one of the things that really irritated me about it after it was finished was the fact that that song is actually 4 different songs, like 4 separate sections that are all merged into one 45-minute piece. And sometimes I just wanted to hear the third part, or I just wanted to hear the second part and then hear the fourth part. Like skip, And if I wanted to do that, I'd have to hold the button down on my CD player and let it skip, or take the slider on the computer and slide it to approximately where I thought the song started. And that just really, really irritated me. And subsequently, I kind of stopped listening to it. And so I knew when I was hatching my plan for Ad Astra 3 that When the Wind Comes was going to be the majority of that CD. It's 45 minutes long. You can only fit about 72 minutes on a CD safely. So you're there's kind of a limit to how much time you have. So I knew, right out of the gate that this song was going to be the meat and potatoes of this album. And I thought that was kind of cool because technically there's only 3 songs on the record. And Ad Astra 3, sticking with the numeral 3 kind of theme. My favorite number, or one of my favorite numbers. So let's see. The situation was, I had decided that I was going to take When the Wind Comes, the 45-minute song, and when I put it on the CD, I would have it so that there would be continuous play. That is, there would be no breaks in between those 4 separate ideas, but they would be separate tracks on the CD, so that when I wanted to hear the third part, I would just click to it would be track number 4, and there you go. But the whole thing was still seamless in one long piece of music, so I retained its continuity, but I was able to break it up for you and for me to skip to these different sections. And that was kind of I wouldn't say it was hard to learn how to do that, but it was like a process, learning how to break a song up like that and keep it in continuous play and have it function on a compact disc or as a WAV file or whatever effectively. So there was a little tricky for me, and once I kind of devoted the time to figuring that out, and I did figure it out, I decided that okay, what I'll do is I'll go back to the very first song and I'll make the whole album continuous play. So there will be no breaks between any of the songs, and you press play and there's continuous sound all the way to the end of the CD. So that was the first time I ever had to do that, the first time I ever tried to do that, and it's with Ad Astra 3. So I thought that was kind of cool. And that allows me to kind of go into each one of those separate sections and talk to you about those, because they're important, at least if you're interested in what I'm saying so far. So we had When the Wind Comes, which is the main title, and that whole 4-part saga starts with section 1, part 1. That section is called Yes. And the reason that I called it Yes, let's see. The word yes is a very interesting word to me, and it always has been. It's a small word, it's 3 letters, it's an affirmation, it's affirming. It's a positive and optimistic word, and it's a very powerful word. Another reason why I decided to call that song Yes was because I was remembering that story about John Lennon and Yoko Ono, how they first met, and he went to a gallery, her art was on display there, and he climbed up the ladder, and he held up the magnifying glass, and then on the ceiling it said yes. Sure, everybody is familiar with that story. At least I hope you are, because it's a good story. But I always kind of remembered that, and I think I really kind of understood the sentiment behind that piece of artwork, and it really resonated with me. And I think that that sentiment lives in a lot of my music and in a lot of my art. So I thought, oh, that would be cool to just call a song Yes, and it would be like a tribute to that, that sense of optimism and happiness that she was trying to convey in that piece of art. All right, so now that I've explained to you my affinity for the word yes and why I chose that word, I can explain to you the story of how the song got its name. Now bear with me, because this is kind of confusing. I'm going to try to explain it as clearly as I can and as quickly as I can. Now, in the beginning, when I was first recording When the Wind Comes and writing it, that little introduction piece, that 12-minute piece, didn't have a name, and it didn't have any lyrics. It was just music. And later on, when I decided to stretch that 12-minute piece into what I now call 2 Hour Yes, I decided that right at the 1 hour mark of 2 Hour Yes, smack dab in the middle of the song, exactly in the middle, if you listen very carefully, you'll hear me say yes. It's the only lyric in the song, and it's right at the 1 hour mark. So having said that, when it came time to assemble Ad Astra 3, and I had broken up the song When the Wind Comes into 4 different sections, I realized that I had never really named that first section. It was just the intro to When the Wind Comes. But then I remembered that I did turn that piece of music into 2 Hour Yes, and there was a lyric, there was a name. It just wasn't 2 hours anymore. It was only 12 minutes. So I called it Yes. Okay, so what's interesting about that to me is that when I made the song in the beginning, I didn't name it. I then re-edited just that piece of music, and then I named it. And then when I had to go back to it, I now had a name for it. And I thought that that was kind of cool, that it started out one way, went to another, went over here, and then I go back to the beginning again. And now that's how it got its name. And I thought that that was pretty cool. And so that's why it's called Yes. Simple word, 3-letter word, and has, obviously, as you know now, it's not just some arbitrary name. There's meaning and intention behind it, as there is with every single thing I have ever made. And you'll find that out as time goes on, and I do more of these little talking bits. I really do think about this stuff. It's not just meaningless music. I mean, it has meaning. Okay, so then we have so we had Yes. No, okay, I should say about Yes. Okay. Yeah. I had a little bit of extra time one day. Little side story here about the song Yes. On a Saturday, I woke up and didn't have anything in particular to do, and I decided, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take a piece of music, like that song Yes. I'm gonna take that little piece of music, and I'm gonna loop that thing for like 2 hours. And 1, see if I can do that. 2, see if I post it, if anyone even cares, if people like it or not. And a 2-hour song, of this repetitive thing. So really quick, probably by lunchtime, I had the edits done, I had it done. And then I released it, and it was really kind of just like a goofy experiment. And wow, I mean that song just went crazy, and I couldn't really figure out why, but people really liked it. And subsequently, that piece of music is what, that one that I made on that Saturday, just goofing around, that's the one that broke the Guinness World Record, which is even more hilarious to me. I can't even believe that, you know? And that was never the intention behind making that piece of music. And I won't get into the whole Guinness thing because that's a whole separate story. And I'll probably talk about it somewhere down the line because I think people might be interested, but I'm not going to talk about it here. But the point is that that little song, Yes, that started out at 3 minutes, wow, you know, it was kind of like it. I had no idea what the future was for that little piece of music. So that's hilarious to me, actually. I can't believe it. Still can't believe it. It's so funny and so silly. Okay, so from that song, Yes, we go into the actual song, When the Wind Comes. I kind of talked to you about that a little bit, how it came from the sun and the sky, that other song and all that. That's where the lyrics come from and the title comes from. So we covered that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about When the Wind Comes. I don't think there is right now that I can think of. So that song, that section, the second section, we have the first section, Yes. We have the second section, which is When the Wind Comes, and then that segues into the third section. And that third section is called On Axis. Now, On Axis is, I guess I can explain the title a little bit, maybe. On Axis, the idea was, in my mind, was the Earth on its axis, that the world turns and things change. And you're turning away from something. You're in this case, in that song, I expressed that I'm kind of turning away from. Well, I won't get into that. I'll let you kind of read it and decide for yourself what I'm talking about. But the point was this idea of being on axis and turning away, rotating away from something and into a new thing, a new way of thinking. Okay. Around the time that I was writing that song, I was like on a Dylan kick. And I'll just talk about that briefly, really quick, because I think it's actually pretty funny. But like for years, I could not stand Bob Dylan's music. I mean, I just could not stand it. I thought his voice was terrible. I couldn't understand why everybody liked what he was doing. And then one day I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to really give him a try. I'm going to go back to the beginning of his career, and I'm going to listen to his music and see if I can find something in it, if I can see what it is that people have latched onto with this guy. So I went to my nearest public library because we all should support our public libraries. Anyway, so I went and got the first 3 albums that Dylan released. And right from the very first CD, right from the very first song, on the first album, I think it was the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, I got it instantly. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, it was absolutely awesome, and it sounded nothing like the material that I was familiar with. And it was like it changed everything for me. And so I always kind of laugh a little bit because I went from one extreme to the other really in about 30 seconds. Like, I just totally got it. Now it's like one of my favorite albums. And at that time when that happened, I was still writing songs, and there is no way that you can hear Bob Dylan and not in some way have to emulate what you're hearing or feeling. I'm convinced of that. So that little story is done. And so I wrote this song called On Axis, and I think I'll just go right ahead and play a little bit of that song right here. Turn away from the myth of more, from the hopeless exhaustion and score. place where your innocence died from the groaning of loneliness sighs. Turn away from the love that you've lost. Turn away from the time and the counting of cost. Turn away. Turn away. I have to honestly say, and it probably has something to do with that whole Dylan thing, that I really do feel that they're probably some of the best lyrics that I've ever written. Because when I hear it now, I realize that that song and the lyrics to that song really kind of encapsulate everything I'm trying to say through all of my music and all of my art in one way or another. It's almost a mission statement. I mean, it's that concise, and I think it's that well written. And because of that, it's made reappearances, and will continue probably to make reappearances in the future on different CDs or in different pieces of music that I'm working on. So with On Axis, even when I hear it now, I just think to myself, I really hit the bullseye with that one. I suppose another story that I could tell you about On Axis, there's actually two. Now, I used to be in a band called Slow Bob, and I have some of that music available on YouTube. You can check it out if you want to. I was the drummer in that band, and it was a very good band. We were very tight and very efficient, and a lot of the material that we did, I feel, was well written and well constructed. And the only problem with that was, and the reason why I'm bringing it up now, is because on the end of our CD that we had released, we released one CD. It was called And Through the Order. The closing track on the album was, unlike the previous songs on the record, it was recorded live in the studio, with a very loose construction. I mean, we had performed the entire CD live, but the song at the end was kind of like an experiment and kind of an open-ended ambition. So years later, listening to that, I really was kind of displeased with it, and I really felt that the concept was good. It could have been so much stronger. And I imagined if I could take that song and change it somehow, what would I do with that piece of music, or what would I do with that structure that song had? So when I was doing On Axis, I was trying to reconstruct that song by Slow Bob in a pipe choir context. And so that's why the song on the pipe choir debut CD, the version of the song on that CD, starts out the way it does, and then it, explodes into this bombastic, booming, loud thing. And that's what I was going for. That was one thing I would want to mention, is that it was really an experiment, going back into my past and taking a piece of music that was from an entirely different group that I was in and bringing it into the future and kind of changing it to what I think it could have been. The second thing that I want to mention about the music for On Axis, there's a song by Dave Matthews called Don't Drink the Water. And I really like a lot of his music, and his drummer is just smoking, okay? In the world of drummers, he's like the king, okay? But they have this song called Don't Drink the Water. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. And I really love the song, but the problem with it, in my book, was the song stays the same for a very, very long time, and it's good and everything. But then at the end, it's like there's like a climax, and you have to wait until the very, 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 very end of the song to kind of like get the payoff. I had wished that they had done it sooner in that song because it's just so compelling. So what I did was, when I was doing On Axis and mashing it up with the slow bop thing, I was also kind of pulling it into this context of like, okay, I'm going to go to that payoff section and Don't Drink the Water, and I'm going to see what chords they're playing. And then I'm going to write a song around those chords. So you get the payoff right away, like right in the beginning, you know, and it carries over like through the whole song, you know, like you stay in it. You don't have to wait for it. It's there, and it lasts for a little while. I feel that it's worth mentioning here because I really feel like it demonstrates the playful nature of my creative process. I don't know. So there you go. There's a little bit about that. And so as of August 2016, I've released 4 different versions of the song On Axis. The first time it was released was on the debut CD for Pipe Choir, when I first wrote it. The second time was on the PC1 Wilderness album, and the third time was in the 3-hour song I have called In the Garden, and the fourth time now is here on Ad Astra 3. And so from On Axis, it goes into the song which closes the When the Wind Comes saga. Goes into a piece of music that I called Ocean Tapping. And Ocean Tapping was the idea, or the what I was going for there was, I knew in the beginning I had a 12-minute piece. It was called Yes, and it was this kind of chilled piece of music that eased you in. It was repetitive. It was conducive to thinking, not being distracted. Like, you kind of get into a zone. And I knew that after, like, what I considered the intensity of When the Wind Comes and On Axis, that the storm would pass, things kind of simmer down, and that's what Ocean Tapping was meant to kind of be, was like the storm going away, and now, the aftermath, or the calm after the storm. And I had considered taking Yes and just taking that whole piece of music and just, copying it right to the end of the song, and there you go, bookended, nice and tidy. It starts the same way it ended. And then I decided, no, there's a better way. So what I did was make a whole entire new little piece of music, which wasn't hard to do, and kind of just go wherever it took me, to go wherever I was led, So, you hear the ocean waves, you hear the seagulls, which I can mention really quick. I was particularly proud of because I had to simulate seagulls on my guitar. And I remember at the time I was doing that for Ocean Tapping, I was kind of like overly concerned that they would not sound like seagulls, and then people wouldn't get what I was going for, which makes me laugh a little bit now just even thinking about it, because it's so stupid, but because it sounds like seagulls. I mean, I hear it now, and it does the job. As far as I'm concerned, it does. But I just remember being really like uptight about that, and trying and make sure, really make sure, and something like so thoroughly unimportant, really, but really thinking about it like it matters, more than anything else. And then so that was where the ocean comes, from the title Ocean. Now for the tapping part, if you listen to the music, you'll hear just periodically, I think I did it even randomly, it's not like on a click track, I just kind of with my finger, my eyes closed, hit the note, wait a little bit, hit the note, wait a little bit, hit the note, just like where I felt the note should go. You hear this like boom, boom, and it was like this tapping, you know. That's kind of what it made me think of, because I was tapping it with my finger, you know, on the keyboard. So, ocean tapping, bam, name, cool, one word, not two words, but the T would be capitalized in tapping, so it's two separate words mashed into each other, and that falls into the whole I love playing with names and language and all that kind of stuff. So I was happy with that, and so that's ocean tapping. Now, ocean tapping segues into reach out, return to me. Oh man, reach out, return to me. Well, let's see, what would I say? Well, I can tell you really quick where the name comes from. The name comes from another song, once again, that I had written a while ago, and it was kind of sitting in the vault, you know, sitting there collecting dust. It was called Return. It was called Reach Out to Me, and I'll go ahead and play a little bit of that song for you right here. It's a pretty good song. It's decent. Just never went back to finish it. Maybe I will someday, but there it sat. And so I sat down and I said, okay, now I'll make a new piece of music. And so I started putting down beds and started the whole process. And once again, got it to a certain point, you know, with the music and the chord changes and the sections or whatever. And then I started to scat vocals over it. Once again, you know, singing with the soul first, and that's what I did. And then in that process, these lyrics started to pop out. This song that I'd written a while ago and kind of forgotten about started to reemerge, and it fit really well. And at the time I wrote the song, it had like a meaning way back in the day. And when I pulled it into what would now be Reach Out, Return to Me, I was kind of wondering while I was doing it, what the hell am I talking about? It doesn't make any sense. It wasn't until much later, after the song had been released and I hadn't heard it for a while, and then I finally did hear it later, I realized what I was actually singing about. And I know what I'm talking about, at least I think I do. And I won't get into that because the world's not ready for what I'm actually talking about in that song. But it was kind of cool how that can happen, I felt. And I guess I can say, too, about Reach Out, Return to Me. And there's a lot that I could say about that particular song. Let's see. I could say there was a vocal line that I absolutely hated. There's the part at the end where I was saying, stretch your hand across the void, you know, reach out to me. I mean, the lyrics weren't bad, but it just was like, I would hear that part start, and I would just cringe. I just hated it. I hated it. And, sometimes you just don't get it right. I'm going with what I think is good at the time, and then, wow, sometimes you're just way off. And I thought, man, this is my opportunity to go back and scrap that part of the song and at least replace it with something else. So I did. I called the session up again in my system, edited that horrible part out, and I instead just decided to loop the chorus part until it faded out. I mean, it was kind of like a quick fix, but so much better than what was there before. So the version of the song on Ad Astra 3 is different than the original version that I released, which is kind of interesting, I suppose, kind of cool. A little bit of information. Let's see. Oh, the guitar line for Reach Out, Return to Me. That's funny. I remember when I was recording the guitar line, what I was trying to go for was John Frusciante's guitar sound for Under the Bridge, like that clean Hendrix kind of sound, you know? And that's what I was shooting for. But man, when I listen to it now, I mean, at the time I thought, wow, this is pretty close. This is pretty good. I'm close, you know. And I listen to it now, and it doesn't sound anything like that to me. So there again, another example of how you hear something initially and how you hear it much later can be two very different things. So whenever I hear that guitar line, I think it sounds good in its own right and in its own way, but I laugh to myself because it's like I totally missed the mark there. It's not at all what I was going for. And then, you know, there it is. It's done. And it's there. Okay, let's see. Another thing I could say about Reach Out, Return to Me, which is kind of cool. So I'll talk about it. There was the jumping off point for that piece of music, and I remember this now, for Reach Out, Return to Me was like a conscious maneuver on my part. I have an old Tascam 4-track recorder with, you know, cassette tape recorder. And you know, when I first started to learn the art of home recording, it was what I kind of cut my teeth on. And you know, it served its purpose and everything, but oh my gosh, you know, the sound quality is so terrible. But it was good for getting ideas and sketches down and things like that. And I had amassed, over the period of time I was using it, a pretty large collection of song ideas. I have to say, when I look at it, I'm looking at it right now, I was pretty busy. I was doing a lot of stuff. I was pretty excited about recording and having that opportunity and learning how to do that. So anyway, I decided when I wanted to do this new PC3 song, this new 20-minute song, that what I would do is go back into those old 4-track sessions that I did and kind of just like skim through them, see if there was, you know, maybe a few tracks that stood out to me as something worth working on and updating and, you know, devoting time to. And I probably found maybe 5 pieces or so of music that were very short, 4-track horrible recordings, but song seeds, you know, enough to start from. And from that 5, I picked one that was called Midnight. That was the name of this sketch that I did. And I'll play a little bit of that for you so you can hear what that 4-track recording sounds like. And so that was the jumping off point. So, and that's what I did. I recreated what I heard on the cassette tapes, or on the 4-track, and, you know, pulled it into this new piece of music. And that was the foundation, the original foundation for that song, which I thought was cool because I at the time, I had not really done a whole lot of that. And after I did Reach Out, Return to Me, it was only after that I started to actually see the value in going back and mining some of my older and crude ideas and updating them and giving them a facelift, you know. I can't really think of anything else right now that I would want to say about Ad Astra 3. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee if you don't mind, because my voice is getting a little raspy. I hope that you listen to Ad Astra 3, and I hope that you enjoy it. And if you do, I hope that this little bit of talking will maybe be enjoyable as well. I'll admit, I was a little reluctant to do this kind of thing because I wasn't quite sure if it would be perceived as like a vanity exercise, or if it would be perceived how I intended it, which was, I know, like, for myself and for my wife too, actually, we both kind of enjoy the extras, like on DVDs. We're sometimes the extras and the bonus features and things like that are more interesting than the featured content. And oftentimes, if that's not the case, they at least augment the featured content. So enjoying that myself and seeing the value in that myself, I decided to do this kind of thing because it's what I would want. So there you go. It's my little gift to you. Hopefully you'll take it in the spirit of that, and hopefully you'll enjoy the CD, because I worked really hard on it and I put a lot of thought into everything that went on it. If you like this little bit of talking that I'm doing, the good news is that I'll be doing more of these. I'm going to cover at least all of the CDs that I've released up until this point, and I'll take it from there, kind of see how it goes. If people seem to like it, then maybe it's something I'll do for every album that I release in the future as well. So this is Mike Bostwick from Pipe Choir Records. You've been listening to SnowFlake 33, and I appreciate you listening to SnowFlake 33. And I'll sign off for now. And remember, folks, if you want to keep what you've got, you got to give it away. Thank you.